Hey friends, Mason from Magoosh here. In my last video, I started talking about the meaningful differences between the GRE and the GMAT in terms of how the test is administered. But now, let's talk about what's inside, because if you're still stuck at that fork in the road where you don't know which test to take, then you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper to make that decision. Let's chat a bit about the verbal sections on each test first, starting with how these sections are similar. Both verbal sections of the GRE and the GMAT do contain some exercises that look very similar. We call these reading comprehension exercises, and it basically requires you to read passages that are written at an academic level and answer questions about them. These are designed to test your ability to read quickly and effectively, picking up on major themes and information, often analyzing different logical components of the passages as well. In general, the GMAT passages tend to be just a little bit tougher than the GRE, but both are going to require some practice in order to master. Now let's talk about how these verbal sections are different. The GRE is somewhat notorious for testing you on vocabulary. You have to be learning big vocabulary words as part of your preparation for doing well on the verbal sections of the GRE. The GMAT has a different emphasis. The GMAT cares way more about grammar. It has question types designed to test your ability to accurately determine whether a sentence is grammatically correct, what should be changed, and so that's a different kind of skill. And that's the biggest difference between these verbal sections, is that the GRE places a higher emphasis on vocabulary, whereas the GMAT places a higher emphasis on grammar. So, if you're making your decision on the basis of the verbal sections, you might start by asking, well, what am I better at and more comfortable at? Is it learning vocabulary words, or is it applying my knowledge of grammar? And maybe you're better at one or the other. That can help you make this decision. All right, let's turn now to the quantitative side of these two tests. The good, or maybe bad news here, is that both tests are very similar when it comes to the quantitative reasoning sections. They're going to be testing your knowledge of arithmetic, algebra, geometry, data interpretation, word problems, so there's a lot of overlap there. Where the tests are a little bit different is in the overall difficulty. Experts generally agree that the math on the GMAT is simply a little bit harder, so it might take some more practice there if you're someone who's not quite up to date on their math skills. There are also some differences in question type and format, so regardless of which test you choose, you're going to have to study that test and so that you know what to expect. One last difference between the two tests when it comes to the math is the presence of an on-screen calculator. On the GRE, you do have access to an on-screen calculator. Hooray! On the GMAT, you will not. So, if you're someone who's a little bit nervous about mental math, that might be a good indication that the GRE is for you. However, that being said, a lot of our strategies on the GRE say not to touch that calculator unless you absolutely have to. So you're probably going to have to learn some mental math either way, but definitely more so for the GMAT. Lastly, let's talk about the AWA, or the Analytical Writing Assessments. Both the GRE and the GMAT contain these AWA exercises, and both are asking you to effectively critique and analyze arguments in essay form. The one difference here is the GRE has a secondary essay in which you're asked to actually craft an argument around a certain issue, which is a slightly different exercise. But in terms of overall preparation, both of those are going to be very, very similar between the GRE and the GMAT. Just one last note here, the GMAT does contain a section called Integrated Reasoning, or the IR section, that doesn't really have a counterpart on the GRE. There are some other tests, such as the SAT and ACT, that have similar sections, but basically this is where you're asked to dive into interpreting graphics and answering questions about them. So be prepared for that if you're leaning towards the GMAT. All right, so that was a high-level overview of the content of the GRE and the GMAT. If you're still on the fence, not quite sure which one to go towards, in my next video, I'm going to cover some factors such as pacing, timing, and scoring to help you further inform that decision. So head over there next to learn more about that.